We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse's Phil Brasher, as well as this week by California Republican David Valadao. Congressman Valadao, appreciate you joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, for starters, for those that might not be familiar, currently serving your fourth term in Congress after 3 terms earlier in the previous decade, but there was a 2-year break in there, and recently came back to Congress, member of the House Ag Appropriations Subcommittee now. So, getting more and more involved in the foreign policy landscape, but. As you've returned to Congress, obviously a different House, different GOP, different House GOP. As I'm sure a lot of people will know, there was a lengthy meeting yesterday in regards to a leadership election and in regards to consideration of some comments of one of your members. Wondering, as you kind of look around at the current state of your caucus, what do you think it's going to look like in terms of what you all will be able to get done and move forward in terms of conversations that will need to take place within that caucus?
There's always been infighting us at some point or at some level. So it's not uncommon for us to disagree with one another. And obviously these spill a little more out into the news. But I've dealt with this throughout my time in Congress. The difference is we are in the minority now, and the president right now is signing executive order after executive order. And we come back to Washington to vote, and we had 1 vote a couple days ago, 1 vote yesterday, and I think there might be 1 vote tomorrow. With the leadership we've got today, obviously on the Democrat side, Nancy Pelosi, there's not a lot of policy moving forward. President Biden right now is focusing on executive orders, and his target is to do stuff without the House of Representatives. And to me, that's very frustrating. I know that every president does executive orders, but the amount here and the speed that President Biden is doing them at does not build any way of making us work together. It actually divides Congress, and it divides Washington more so than it already is. So yeah, there's a lot of frustration, but the majority party right now is the one that's setting the schedule and not allowing us to continue to do our work. And so we hope that will change, but it really is much bigger than what's going on inside the actual GOP.
Congressman, speaking of the president, one of his top priority, maybe his highest priority after this pandemic, is climate change, climate policy. Tom Vilsack, who in a few days probably is going to be back at USDA as Ag Secretary, told the Senate Ag Committee this week that he wants to move forward with developing carbon markets and using Commodity Credit Corporation at USDA to start a carbon bank. You have some unique perspective, I think, in California on this issue. You have different soils than maybe they have in the Midwest. And you all have some experience, certainly in the dairy industry, with the methane capture and qualifying for assistance under your cap and trade system there. A little bit different, but general same concept. What's your perspective? What do you think about what the Tom Vilsack, what the administration want to do in terms of ag carbon? Does it make sense?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to live in an environment with clean air and clean water. And so I support the ultimate goals of what they want. I think we're on the same page on that. But as far as markets playing a role in agriculture and in a lot of ways actually holding us back and putting us at a competitive disadvantage, because trade is a big part of agriculture, and making sure that we're competitive on a world stage is a huge part of that. Yes, California has a lot of success stories, and dairy being one of those right now with the digesters. My area, right where I live, my own family is in the process of finishing up their digester as we speak. And so it's a positive thing that's going to bring some revenue. But we have to be careful that the direction the administration wants to go is to push it so far that it'll put our farmers at a competitive disadvantage around the world, and it'll make exports, it'll make much more difficult to happen, and obviously it'll hurt our economy, and it'll hurt the jobs, especially in our rural communities across the country. So we have to make sure that any policy that moves forward allows us to be successful as well.
What are they going to have to do to deal with sort of the regional differences? You obviously, again, you have different soil types. You probably in the Central Valley don't have quite the potential in terms of storing carbon in the soil as they do in, say, Iowa. How are you going to deal with that? Those regional differences when you're looking at this policy and what they're doing in the administration?
Well, and that's the thing is there's always going to be differences in regions. It's always happened in every single commodity, even a lot of commodities that do not grow in many parts of the country. And my part of California grows commodities that only grow there. And so they're going to have to come up with some way to accommodate that and work with us, because we produce almonds, we produce pistachios, we produce a lot of, raisins are all things that are only grown in my area. And so if we destroy those markets, it'll just continue to flood the other markets that, let's say corn, which we are able to grow corn, we're not able to grow soybeans. But if we have to make sure that the administration understands that our regions are different, not just because of different zip codes, but soil types, climate, just the natural environment, the amount of water, all those things play a role in it. And so forcing us into a box that there's no way we'll ever be able to survive is obviously bad policy for agriculture. And I hope to have a good conversation with the incoming secretary about that.
Mm-hmm. Can't let you go without asking you about dairy policy. You know that very well. Where are we in terms of, we've done this omnibus that passed in December before you actually took office, including some additional funding for the dairy margin coverage program, new dairy donation program. We went through a period with a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of turmoil in the dairy sector. What does Congress need to do more? We have the National Farmers Union still pushing the idea of supply management. What would you like to see? What do you think needs to be done vis-a-vis dairy policy? Are we in a good place now?
Dairy policy has always been difficult. Obviously, since '09, we've lost a large number of dairies across the country. California specific, we lost a lot. And it's something that's obviously very close and personal to me, because my own family struggled through the same time. I'm just like the rest of the dairy farmers across the country. But policy in the dairy world is complicated, because it is something that can literally be produced anywhere. And so across the country, there are a lot of big dairy states. California is the #1 dairy state. We produce 20% of the nation's milk, but it could also be produced in other regions of the world. We have to make sure that our trade policy is something that helps protect us, because as you have government regulations coming in and putting more costs on us and making us less competitive, we have to make sure that policies allow us to continue to be successful on a world stage. But also, we have to focus on not just government programs, but the ability to keep supply and demand in check. And I've been part of a lot of those debates. I know National Farmers Union is pushing their policy. I actually met with them last week. I think there's some ideas in there that we need to talk about, because the ability, or the fact that milk prices go up so extreme and down so far just look at 2020, for example. We saw everything from $10 milk to $20 milk in a 6-month span. That is not something that's sustainable for the dairy industry. We have to have some sort of balance so that we're not seeing those extremes and not putting dairymen in such a horrible position. And government plays a big role in that. So I do believe there has to be some sort of program or government assistance to make sure that we're not out there, or government's not out there making the situation worse. If it means backing out, if it means us helping make sure that food box programs work, but making sure that those are balanced to the best of the ability, and to not hurt the marketplace. Because right now we're at 3% year over year. And after 2020, after some of the most extreme swings, obviously the government programs help a lot of dairymen survive. But this next year will be we'll really get to see how much of an impact it really had. And it doesn't look good right now for the beginning of the year.
I want to ask you about immigration too. It's a question we get all the time. When are we going to have a reform of the H-2A program? The president sent a bill up, Congress doesn't deal with farm labor doesn't deal with H2A. Do you see any any real chance of getting a bill through Congress that would maybe not only deal with the legal status of existing workforce, but also expand H2A and deal with year-round, provide year-round workers through H2A?
Well, I really hope so. I know that Zoe Lofgren from California, Dan Newhouse from Washington State in the past Congress worked pretty well together to craft some legislation that had a lot of ag support, at least in California, and I assume the rest of the country. So it is something that's a priority for a lot of us. You're right, the administration isn't talking about it as much as I would like. And obviously because food production is, I think, probably one of the most important things that we can possibly do as a country, making sure that we have a safe and stable food supply. And immigration plays a vital role in that. I have talked to the White House about it. I talked about the fact that I do want to be one of the ones that works with the administration and other members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. And my goal is to make sure that that does happen. What we're seeing today in the environment of Congress is pretty divisive, and we need to get past that and get to the people's business and actually get to work. And I think immigration is something that plays a vital role in that, and especially the future flow component, as you mentioned. I mean, getting to a point where we can resolve the issue of the 11 million here today is important. But moving forward, we have to have a plan in place so that we don't put ourselves in the same position we're in today.
Congressman, I want to wrap up talking about a piece of legislation you introduced this week on California water issues. Obviously, being a producer from that state, it's an issue you've worked on in the past in Congress. But I'm looking at the bill text right now, and it's all of 2 pages. A lot of times when folks make kind of their initial legislative proposal, they start big, and negotiations will eventually winnow it down. This was more of a clean authorization of a couple of of a couple specific provisions in previous legislation. Why did you think that was the approach to take rather than the start big and winnow down approach?
Well, this one's a really simple one. This is a piece of legislation originally, because this is just extending an original piece of legislation that was actually signed into law under the Obama administration and had Democrat and Republican support. It's no cost to taxpayers. It just continues a program that's actually been very successful in California and other parts of the country, making sure that we have the ability to invest in water infrastructure, which it's done quite a bit. A little bit more flexibility in the Delta region so that we can move water south and be able to continue to support our communities, which is important. And that affects both communities, and it also affects the farming communities around that. But it's a simple piece of legislation. I focus on that one because of, one, zero cost. Already had a lot of bipartisan support in the past, and so it should be a pretty easy one to continue to get support on. And 3, it's simple. I mean, you bury a lot of stuff in a lot of text. I mean, 2 pages is really quick and easy. There should be very little to argue over.
And I know I'm not telling you anything when I say that California water politics can be a bit of an interesting legislative minefield. I guess I say that to ask, where do we go from here on this, do you think?
Well, and I know this administration is not going to be easy to work with on, but it is something that I have talked to the White House over the last week quite a bit about. Is there are a lot of areas where we can work together. The policy that President Trump signed back in February of 2020 was that when he did the biological opinions, and when the record of decision was signed, by the time he got on the plane leaving Bakersfield, California that day, Gavin Newsom had already sued. The policy behind that was actually developed under the Obama administration, and it was career staffers that had been there throughout a few different administrations that were part of developing that. It's important that this administration understands that this wasn't a partisan push. This was just a piece of policy that was started under the Obama administration and continued under the Trump administration. And so I asked that the Biden administration not listen to just extremist environmentalists and some of the folks who want to destroy agriculture, but actually get into the science, talk to the career staffers, those who developed it, and understand the policy before they do make a rash decision, because that is something that can truly benefit all communities there in the Central Valley. And it's a rural community. I mean, the district is 70% Hispanic that I represent, 30% foreign born, and it's some of the folks that help deliver food to the country. And it's important that the administration understands that this policy can benefit our food security, but also affect the communities that they claim to be supportive of.
Well, obviously, we could sit here and pick your brain all morning, but out of respect for your time and probably your sanity as well, we'll stop short of doing that. But looking forward to chatting with you again. For now, I appreciate the time.
No, anytime. Thanks for having me.
For Congressman David Valadao and Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.